Well, I wanted to get into the amendment work in a minute, but just as a context, for me, when I was looking at this last election season, one of the things that made me really excited was I was really recognizing how one of the big winners was organizing. The work that all three of your organizations and the myriad of organizations that you represented did an amazing job of educating, informing, and engaging people in the electoral process. And so I just want to talk a little bit about your, about what was the work that you were involved with at your organizations. So what was the on-the-ground work, and how did it look like? And so just a few minutes on that, and we'll jump right into some of the amendments and the turnouts stuff.
People want to jump in?
Start or
Sure, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. So I think the real lesson, as you mentioned, was that organizing matters, and actually it mattered a hell of a lot in all of this work, and whether that was defeating the voter restriction amendment, defeating the marriage amendment, electing more progressive candidates to office in both the House and Senate, and a range of other issues. The work that people in their own communities did day by day by day added up to a lot, and added up to where we're at right now, with really an amazing opportunity in front of us that we all have to figure out how to take advantage of to move this state, in the direction that we all believe in. I think with TakeAction Minnesota and our work, what I didn't say is that we're an organization that has over 14,000 individual members and 28 organizational members, and we work in coalition all the time in different configurations around the state in different communities. And so what was important to us is to, in order to defeat that amendment in particular and to do all the work that we do, we have to put together different configurations of organizations that are committed to grassroots level politics. And I think in the end we came up, the Our Vote, Our Future coalition that ultimately ended up defeating this amendment, came together fairly late. We had canvassers on the ground a year and a half out working on both the marriage amendment and the photo ID, which eventually became the voter restriction amendment when it was passed onto the ballot. We had people out night by night knocking on doors, phoning, trying to assess and trying to explain to people in different communities why this was bad for the state of Minnesota. And so for us, we had kind of an early glimpse into how broad, I guess, the supposed support was, but how really shallow and narrow that support was. And so we had some confidence going into even session this past year that we think if we put up a fight, and we put up a fight that's relevant to communities all over the state, that brings in people kind of on their own terms so that they can explain to their neighbors and their friends and their own networks why this is a violation of their values and of their rights, and why voting rights is something that we can't take for granted. I mean, in our own lifetimes, in many of our lifetimes, as Dr. Josie Johnson, who's one of our 4 statewide co-chairs of the Our Vote, Our Future campaign, said she fought for this in her lifetime. I mean, this is not something that anyone is going to give way to easily. And so I think organizing helped to bring those polls down and crater those polls. We didn't go on TV until 3 weeks out. We did not have a lot of resources until kind of late in the game. And so I think by talking to people on the phones, we talked to over 400,000 people around the state. And that was because we had volunteers coming in night after night, day after day, who were committed to telling a story of personal conviction about why this was bad. And so that is absolutely why these things, were defeated, or we won the legislature back.
So, excuse me. So I just think this is a victory for our state, because organizing was the way that we won on both of the amendments. And I think, I think there could have been a way that we would have done it where it would have been very heady and kind of theoretical about why this is bad for Minnesota, and we could have probably just thought, like, we need to put all of our money, all of it in commercials, all of it in kind of an air game, and we'll win that way, right? And what I love is that we actually knew that really we would win by engaging people and having people tell their real personal stories. And that is the way we won. And on the whole marriage amendment issue, we've had these kind of votes happen since 2004. It was brought forward in 2004 by far right extremists who thought this would be a good way to really try to turn out people to vote, right? And so in 2004, the majority of the constitutional amendments that our state has seen around marriage, and actually most of those amendments actually ban marriage and domestic partnerships, and I like to say library cards, anything, but it's actually it does ban all legal protections for same-sex couples and their families. Those were brought forward with this really cynical kind of thought around what politics is about. And we would fight those from the start with talking about how, constitutions are really meant to enact rights, and wouldn't really talk about the actual people whose lives it was affecting. And what we did differently this year in Minnesota, and actually in other states as well, was actually just have people tell their stories. Whether it's, this is why I think this is really bad for our state, because this is what it means to my family. This is what it means to me. And have these really long, crazy conversations. It sounded kind of crazy to set out from the start to say, some of these conversations on the phones will be 15 to 20 to 30 minutes. And we're just going to do that. We're going to invest in that part for both of the amendments. We're just going to invest in people just telling their story and actually having a conversation. And for me, that just, my little idealist organizer heart, that just makes me so excited, because when we go and talk to strangers and they're thinking why are you at my door, human? You're saying this is the most natural thing that you ever do, is we want to talk about what's important. We're Minnesotans, right? And we should talk about what's important to us and what's important to our families and what's important to our future. And that's what we do as organizers. And that's the way we won. And I can't think of a better story we could tell about the story of Minnesota, that we put ourselves out there, we put our hearts out there, we put our families out there, we put our lives out there, and we won. And I think we just have to keep telling that story, because it's so powerful. And I think that just leads us into what's next, and about what kind of power that those kind of stories can bring into the next, our next victories. And so organizing. Yeah.
So, Danielle, when you're thinking about this one, could you talk about the storytelling that you did through the media, particularly through the new media stuff? Is that okay for me just to change it like that? Because that was the thing that I thought was, as you guys were talking about the ability for organizing and storytelling, I was really excited about the work you guys did in that. So.
I'd love to talk about the storytelling. Okay. I'd like to talk a little bit about the organizing, too. So the organizing that happened with the Voices for Voting Rights campaign was, I guess I would use words creative, innovative, very resourceful. We turned 15 cents into $1, because the money simply was not really there. And there wasn't an investment really in getting the message to communities of color and American Indian communities in Minnesota in a way that our constituents, and I'm saying that from a space of people that work in these communities every day and know their communities very well, we're saying this isn't working. This message that's out here about the voter ID amendment isn't really working for us. It's not resonating. So we need to do something a little bit different. And so the Organizer Apprenticeship Project, Julia and Hannah are here from that project, they were the facilitators of this group, the Voices for Voting Rights, and really led the efforts and partnered with Line Break Media. Nolan is here from Line Break Media, to produce a series of short films that we called, they were like our Voices for Voting Rights. And so we had American Indian Voices for Voting Rights, Arab Voices for Voting Rights, Latino, African American, Somali, and then we had a consolidated one with a full-on message about what this amendment meant to all of us in this space. And what those videos created was an opportunity for all of these different communities to really speak to each other about what the importance of democracy was to them, what the importance of voter rights. So if you're talking to a young immigrant from Somalia, you may not understand the struggles that her family may have had in Somalia for democracy and how important it is to uphold that right to vote here. And through these videos that were mostly bilingual, I think the Somali video was like almost, or which one was almost, it was mostly in, yeah, the Somali video was almost all in Somali. And really amazing videos. So I think anyone could go and check them out. So that was one thing. And then we convened, we called it the red carpet event for voting rights. And we had this event at the Parkway Theater. It was about 3 weeks. Someone else said 3 weeks. Was it you? About 3 weeks? About 3 weeks out from the election. And I think this was a magical time for both amendments. The 3 week out was kind of like this shift, you know? And so we had this event. We packed the Parkway Theater. People from all of these different communities came to the Parkway. Ernesto brought a whole busload of youth from Austin and Owatonna, teenagers dressed to the nines. You can go and look on our Facebook page and check it out. And they're on fire to, and they went back, and I'll let Ernesto maybe tell that story as we open it up later, but I hope you do, about the energy that they have and the work that they've continued to do. And so that event was really amazing. Also that event, we had this group called Face the Vote. Did anyone see any of the Face the Vote videos? Raise your hand, yeah? Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. So Bobby Joe Champion and Nick Muhammad really were the ones pushing this effort ahead to get local hip-hop artists engaged in sharing this message about what the voter ID amendment was. They wrote 3 really incredible, powerful songs about this amendment, about what democracy means. And I think 2 or 3 of the MCs that are featured in those videos aren't even of legal voting age. But they believe in the work, they want to be involved, and those messages and those people are leaders in our community, you know, and they can speak to people in a different way than even I can, than David can, even though we're real cool.
Thanks. That was the nicest thing you've ever said to me all day. Thank you. Kind of cool.
Just slightly too old. Like, we're kind of that mom, dad, you know, phase. But and so I guess this long story is that there were some voters that were getting missed, and I think we're getting taken for granted that they would just know what this amendment meant and that it was bad. But it was a sneaky amendment, right, on purpose. It seems simple to most of us that have a lot of, you know, regular privileges in life, that an ID is just something that you need, you know, and that everybody has. And so it can easily get skimmed by. And Mary Kiffmeyer was not playing. She was on the Somali radio show on KFAI. I happened to have a friend from out of town that was touring the radio station and saw her on the Somali radio show, and so we were like, okay, they're really mapping some things out, so we need to get on the radio show. So I don't know if any of you listen to KFAI, but like the last 2 weeks leading up to the voter ID amendment, almost all of their public policy morning shows from 9 to 10 were covering the voter ID amendment. They did a really amazing job, and that's another thing that I think really was amazing for us, was that those were the only spaces that we could really get our message out there. And when I say we, I mean American Indian communities of color, was through these community media sources. We tried to get them into some of the bigger papers, and they just weren't listening. And so that's a lesson learned, and something that we'll try and make different next time around.